Planning Commission meeting. Thank you all for coming. First on our agenda tonight are the minutes of the meeting of May 6th. Now, we are going to postpone taking a motion on those minutes until next month. We have a guest secretary here with us today. Nice to see you. And we're going to wait until next month to tighten up and make sure that those minutes are correct. Number 2 on the agenda, 123 West Wayne Avenue Partners, converting existing commercial building and single-family residence to individual condo units. Is the applicant here? Who is this? Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, okay. This is Mark Hollowell, who lives on Meadowbrook, resident Township. He purchased this property, I think, around 1995, Mark, is why I went back in the records and found. And basically, it exists today as the same time as he purchased it. It has a building on the front, which he actually put an addition on back in 95. We went to land development and got the approval for that. And in the rear is an existing residence, a carriage house. It's been there since the property was built, probably in 1890 or whatever, and it's being used as a residence. Currently, he has the whole site in corporate name, and all he's really looking to do is change it so he can put Unit 2, the residence, in his and his wife's name for the purpose that he could then, get residential mortgage on it. If he decided to sell it or hand it down to kids, they could receive the property as part of the condominium, and this will remain exactly the same way as it is. So really, we're not changing anything at all. It's the same approval that was granted back in 1995, and all that's happening is we're condoing it so that Unit 1 will be in Mark's corporate name, and Unit 2 will be in his and his wife's name.
So it's not a subdivision, it's just...
It's the MPC, although I don't know if I necessarily agree, but it's been determined that the MPC requires any condominium to come to a planning commission, the Board of Commissioners, for approval. Peter, I guess that would be...
Yeah, under the literal interpretation of the definition of subdivision, that would apply to dividing a property for purposes of a condominium. The only time it doesn't apply is when you're condominiumizing an existing building, just the interior of an existing building, like taking an apartment building and turning it into condos. Then it wouldn't apply, but in this case it would.
Okay. Roger, I have your very short letter on this matter. Is there anything you'd like to go over for the board?
No, I have no comments on this.
I have one question for Mr. Caniglia. How do you, I believe this lot is undersized?
It is... It's R5, it's 9,000, so it's not undersized in the zoning district. R5 requires, I think, like 5,000 square feet.
Okay.
What happened back years ago in R5, you're permitted to have offices. And then they changed the code at some point in the 80s, I believe, that no longer permitted offices in an R5 zoning district.
Julia, I had one question before you.
Just say what the zoning.
You guys?
Nick, I guess the follow-up to that is, if it is a subdivision, I would have to, I would think that both properties or both pieces of land would have to meet the minimum lot size post-subdivision.
Well, it's not a subdivision, though. It's a condo.
Yeah, I know, but it's classified as a subdivision. So I don't know. Have you looked at that?
Not at all, really. And what Mark and I are just saying here, is this zoned R5 or zone C1? I'm trying to look and see if there's a zoning designation on it. It comes, oh, here it is. It's R5. It's part of, it's part of the Wayne Business overlay, at least according to this.
It's not even R5, it's WBOD.
Right, WBOD, yeah. Which permit offices and residential.
What I was trying to understand is, as a result of what you want to do, this parcel will be in common ownership? One owner?
Right now, it's in common ownership. What will happen is Unit 2 will be in his and his wife's name, and Unit 1, which is the commercial property, would be in his corporate name.
Would the units be able
But
to be sold
who
separately?
owns the, what is the entity that owns the condominium?
No. Okay. As I said, Unit 1, when you condominiumize something, right now it's in the name of
123 West Wayne Avenue Partners.
LP?
Which I'm the partner, the general partner and the owner.
Right, and when it gets condoed, what'll happen is you record deeds in the Recorder of Deeds, and Unit 2 will be changed to his and his wife's name, and Unit 1 will be in the corporate name, the 123 West Wayne Partnership.
And each of those condo owners will have some sort of an undivided interest in the common elements?
Yes. Yes.
Will those units be able to be sold separately?
Yes. But then they would have to be, they're sold separately, of course, all the common ownership and all that stuff still remains. In this particular case, you'll notice that there's 2 parking spaces that we've made limited common element with Unit 2.
I want to ask you about why is that?
Because you want 2 parking spots for Unit 2, for the residents.
So is that part of Unit 2?
That's part of Unit 2. It's called a
As part
limited
of their
common
fee
element.
ownership?
It's called a limited common element. It's not really a fee ownership. It's called, when you do a condominium document, the fee ownership is really the 4 walls. And then what you have a common ownership, and you have a limited common ownership. And the limited common ownership means that Unit 2 has control over that limited common ownership.
And if it was ever sold in the future, would that be sold separately?
It would be sold, Unit 2.
The interest in the limited common element?
Yes. It would be sold the same. There's a declaration that you file.
Right.
And the declaration that you file indicates, and this plan gets filed too, and it indicates what is in common ownership, what is limited common ownership, and what is in fee ownership. So the fee ownership is Unit 2, the fee ownership is Unit 1 for Unit 1, then there's some limited common ownership, and then there's a common ownership. So the white is basically the common ownership, the cross-hatched is the limited common element, which means that Unit 2's got to cut the grass, that's grass there, that limited common element there, and those 2 parking spots would be the responsibility of Unit 2 as well.
This was actually just going to be my question. Peter or anyone, do they need to have basically a condominium homeowners association document covering this for the
No, the declaration what Nick talked about will set forth. There's a state law, just like there's the MPC. There's a separate state law for condos, and that law sets forth how a condominium is set up, what needs to be set forth in the declaration, who's responsible for what, who pays for what, and so under the state law they would be required to file this declaration. And that will lay out all the responsibilities and ownership interests of, in this case, the 2 parties. And then, as each unit is sold, the new owners will then be subject to that declaration, as part of their purchase. There will be some sort of rules and requirements, just like in a homeowners association. And actually, homeowners association must conform to another state law, which is essentially the same. So there is something like that. It's just something different.
I think my question is, and that all makes sense, is that typically in a land development process, when we have a condominium, having to file that declaration or that form or whatever that is part of the process. How will that happen in this situation?
To be honest, it's already been filed.
Oh, well, then it's taken care of. Okay.
We kind of jumped the gun a little bit, and I can give you a recording number on it.
I just wondered that that it has to happen, so you've already taken care of it. Great.
So,
That's the great thing about the Planning Commission. We learn stuff every week, every month.
Nick, who will own the underlying land? Is there a separate association? Is the owner of one of the units?
Yeah, well, what will happen, the underlying land will be owned by, just like any condo, you have common elements here, so they'll be owned by both of them. And then what will happen is we're going to have to do bylaws, of course, for the condominium association, because you have to do a condominium association as a result of this also. So basically, the condominium association kind of runs everything, just like you would in a condo, and then you own certain pieces.
And so just for the Planning Commission's sake, the entire piece of property will be owned by the condominium association, but under the declaration, the common areas and the limited common areas, the declaration will set forth who is allowed to use and maintain each of those areas. generally speaking.
I guess, yeah, to explain it, in
Yeah.
some sort of legalese. I mean, technically, the underlying property is owned by the unit owners, just like when you have,
Right.
So. Yeah,
It's
just
like any condo association, it's just that there are only two of them.
right.
Can I give Nick a gift?
You may.
I'm going to make a motion to approve this application.
After we go to public comment.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Since Roger had no comments on it,
Is there any
to be honest, Susan, I was expecting something like that tonight. So,
Is there any public comment? Excellent.
I move we approve the application.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Would you do me a favor, Nick? Would you put the second page up?
The page I just had up.
No, the other one, because it has a photograph there.
Okay, next on our agenda,
No, you see in the
sorry.
building, a couple doors down, that's Central Baptist Church. You see that the little rectangular? Put your finger up. Up, further north. Up, 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 up. A little further north. That one.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
No, that rectangle there is solar panels. And my mom, when she was 86, encouraged the church to do that. Just so you know.
Right here?
Those are,
thank you
those
for
are solar
sharing,
panels.
Doug.
I just thought that was strange. Thanks.
You're scaring me, Doug. I thought there was something you did wrong. So.
Next on our agenda is SEPTA would like to make station improvements to the Villanova train station, and this is a sketch plan.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Dave Falcone. I'm here on behalf of SEPTA. I have with me tonight Julie Rentz and Daniel Humes with Urban Engineering. They're the engineers on the project, as well as Bill Caden from SEPTA. I'll briefly kind of describe what we're proposing here. This is just a sketch plan. We're looking for feedback from the Planning Commission before we submit any formal application. But this is part of a larger redevelopment project by SEPTA of this Villanova station. What we're looking at this point is an expansion to some degree of the existing parking area from 161 to 169 spaces, but that is more a product of the fact that we're doing some renovations to the tunnel and to some stairs and canopy work down closer to the station, which is taking up and kind of consuming some of the spaces down in that area, which is back in here.
Is this going to be a development similar to what was done to the Wayne Station?
Similar, yes.
So it'll be similar to the Wayne Station. Again, I'll just do a quick overview and then I'll turn over a full description of the project. But one thing I do want to point out is as part of this, even though you'll see on the sketch plan our existing conditions are remaining virtually the same, we are proposing stormwater infiltration system and management system out in this area of the parking lot just to try and put something there where there is nothing right now with respect to managing stormwater, because we understand the importance of that. We're also proposing spaces. Part of the waiver requests that we're having this evening we're proposing spaces and general conditions that are currently existing in the current parking lot and at the station, whereas, for example, the parking space size is 9 by 18 as opposed to 9.5 by 20. We are proposing to keep the spaces virtually the same size as they are now. That's allowing us to keep the impervious where it is and not look for more impervious with respect to parking cover. And we think this works. This is consistent with what SEPTA uses at other stations, because our parking here at this facility, like our others, is more of a come and park, stay all day, come back, get in your car and leave, as opposed to more of a shopping center where it's in and out. And you need more of that movement size for movement purposes. But I'll turn it over to Daniel now to describe the project in more detail. But I'm here as well. Again, we have SEPTA representatives too. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Daniel Humes. We designed the station improvements, and with the new station improvements, we have the new platform, high-level platform, goes from approximately this area here on the plan all the way down to the southern end, or I'm sorry, the eastern end of the site. The proposed tunnel underneath of the tracks, inbound and outbound, is located here, as Dave kind of pointed out initially, and the low-level platforms will be from approximately this staircase heading westward underneath of the State Route 320 overpass. In order to meet the current SEPTA requirements for the platforms, the width of the platforms, and the location in proximity to the actual train itself, the platform extends out, and then ADA accessible ramps have been drafted up, which forces the parking that was there to be eliminated. And in order to meet the client's SEPTA's request, as well as the Radnor comprehensive plan to improve, enhance regional rail through a combination of commuter parking, we have to kind of extend the parking lot expansion and site development in that aspect to gain the parking back, as well as increase some of the parking at the eastern end of the site, where Dave pointed out that we have a stormwater management feature.
Could you just point out where is the existing impervious and where would the new parking be?
Sure. We actually drafted up a quick plan here.
I think this might also help. There's an aerial.
Yeah, so that might help. We did draft up a quick plan here. I don't know if you can see it. All right. So within the property limits, the gray hatching is basically the existing impervious area in the existing condition, and then the plan just below is the proposed impervious area in the same parking lot.
But it does go off to the right where you see at the bottom there it's clear that.
Yes.
That's additional parking, right?
That is additional parking, yes.
Now I happened to ride that train, happened to look out the window as I went by today. That's already covered with impervious stuff, is it not?
Correct, yes.
So you're going to keep, in the proposed stormwater management area, there's parking spaces there you're going to keep, but you're going to put a management system underneath of the existing parking lot?
Correct. Conceptually, right now, what we have is an existing parking lot. What we're really planning on doing here is kind of paint striping and maybe some curb work to improve that, so that cars are more delineated and have a designated parking stall for themselves. So the earthwork, I guess, that you may describe down in this area is fairly minimal, other than the actual stormwater management feature, which is this hatching here.
Well, can that be, why is it only that size? I mean, I don't know whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. I know this is just a sketch plan, but isn't there, can that be enlarged? Is there some reason why it's limited as it appears on the sketch plan?
Our preliminary computations, we use the TR55 method as designated by your ordinances, and we assumed a curve number of 98. So no, curve number is the equivalent to impervious area. It's basically 98% of water runoff. And we've run through the computations for approximately a 1.5 acre drainage area that will actually be managed by this stormwater system. The existing stormwater already from the Villanova property already goes to the basin just east of the site, which is probably more easily shown on the aerial. Just beyond this parking lot, there is a stormwater basin here. And so the existing stormwater for much of the site already goes to that management facility. And what we're proposing to do is basically manage the stormwater for the area that we're redeveloping, to manage roughly 1.5 acres of stormwater runoff. And 1.5 acres in the TR55 equivalent method at a conceptual level is approximately 50,000 gallons of storage for the 50-year storm. And what we're doing is we're utilizing the other watershed as per your ordinance, and the other watershed requires the 50-year be reduced to the 25-year storm event. So that 50,000 gallons right now is a conceptual number, but we feel very comfortable with that number. And this basin has been designed sized proportionally at what we think is basically a 40% void ratio, which is stone bed, which is just 100% stone, so that whatever system we design should be reduced from this footprint. Basically, a 40% void ratio allows for a maximized footprint. And if we go with a system that is 100% open, like think about a milk jug that's basically open, you can fill it all the way up, or a milk jug that's filled with a bunch of ice cubes, you have less water that you can actually put into that space. So what we've done is we've assumed that it's basically a stone bed which has the least amount of void space in it, so that therefore the footprint, length by the width, has been increased to the maximum area. And within this footprint, we can kind of design a pipe and stone bed, or maybe a full concrete structure that's 100% open. That would allow more stormwater to actually be stored in that space.
Do you know if the space perks? Like, do you know that it can actually hold that volume of water and it's not going to fill up? And do you have a positive overflow?
Right now, we have not, as far to my knowledge, we haven't had any infiltration testing done. I believe that is in the future process. We will, after conceptually kind of going through this, we will design an overflow structure that will ultimately tie back into the stormwater network here. You may not be able to see, but there's a stormwater network that runs again to that basin here.
So in other words, the system, if it does need to overflow, will go to that system, to that existing system, which could handle it potentially.
Correct.
And it will not affect anybody downstream?
No, it will not. Yeah, the way we'll design it is to, again, meet the stormwater regulations, where the 50-year storm event will be reduced to the 25-year peak discharge, and the 100-year will remain the same at 100-year pre- and post-developed peak discharge rates.
Okay.
That the other basin, though, is that on Villanova's property?
That is on Villanova's property, yes.
Is there some arrangement between SEPTA and Villanova for this?
For this project...
Well, the overflow to go into that basin.
I believe so. I believe Villanova is 100% aware of the project as we've discussed this project with them. Regarding stormwater management specifically, we'll have to go back and verify that. But.
Any other board questions?
I guess we'll let Roger. I have a question based on one of Roger's comments.
So let's start with Roger.
Yeah.
All right. Roger, do you want to give us a brief summary of your opinion?
Well, I completed my review, and you all have a copy of my letter, and it basically it takes you through what they had just described. If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
I was just looking at general comment number 2, where it says that the plan may have an increase of impervious. And I'm wondering, are they going to, at some point, are they going to have to go to zoning for relief for that to further increase the impervious, or will it still be within the limits of what's? I think it's already an existing nonconformity. Yeah. So are you guys you're already planning to go to zoning if that's the case?
So we're still, and we had a meeting about this, and we're going to meet with staff. But one of the things we're trying to do, on the plan and the calculations you see, we show spaces at 9.5 by 18. Existing is 9 by 18. When I met with SEPTA, I said we should probably talk about it with the Planning Commission and try and keep spaces at 9 by 18 and put more green in. Put more planting aisles in, show more green on the property to at least keep impervious exactly the same. And the numbers, when we had the meeting, they weren't able to give me specifics on where they are. They said they're both 74%, but it could be within 1%. So I said we have to get specifics once we get to the actual plan submission. But to the extent that we can keep spaces where they are now, 9 by 18, and show more green and keep impervious where it is exactly or lessen it, that would be ideal. So that was one of the things we would talk about with the Planning Commission to see how strongly you all felt about increasing parking space size, or if you think 9 by 18 is sufficient given that it works now. But that's really, up to you all.
Well, I have a question. I'm fine with the size of the spaces because it works for you in other locations. But I've noticed that several of these waivers have to do with landscaping, trees, planting strips. And that's important to us here in Radnor Township. Obviously, a lot of what you have is existing.
Right.
But since you're doing all this work, I would like to see that, become more in keeping with Radnor's code rather than less.
So actually it does, which is interesting.
Okay.
Where we expand, and this is, again, something we talked about in our meeting, but because I had the same thought. If we're going to be doing anything, we should probably be going closer to conformity with the ordinance. Where one of the waivers we have is the number of spaces in a row, which is allowed by township. We are going closer to conforming with the ordinance as opposed. We are shrinking the distance between islands, length of spaces in a row. So where maybe now you might have 45, we're dropping to 39. The ordinance permits 15. So and this is at 9.5. What I had suggested to the client was, well, if we go to 9, we can put a planting aisle in between. It won't be at the required 10 or 15 spaces, but it might be at 18 spaces instead of 42 spaces in a row.
Yeah, but generally, we shouldn't have to choose between which of the code requirements you're going to follow, the size or the landscaping.
Understood. We do. So what we're trying to do here is minimize change. So we know we need more parking. And where we're not really changing the back area, the existing parking. I mean, that's kind of where it is. We're removing spaces where the handicap stalls are going to be. This whole back portion is not changing at all. We're not doing any restriping, redevelopment of the back. It's all going to be, and you can see it kind of. We'll have better plans certainly next time we appear, but where the existing is and where the proposed is, you can see how the lines shift a little bit, but parking spaces are there. We're not putting new spaces in. We're shifting them. We're not the only new spaces we're creating are towards the edge, are out here. Everything else is being removed on this end. We're losing spaces and picking them up back here. So if we were going to try and change this parking area, that would require more spaces on the back end and would certainly increase impervious. For septic, I mean, this lot is a full capacity lot as it is. So they are parked to the maximum. So we're trying to do our best to manage stormwater in a situation where there is no management currently in this parking area. There's Villanova management when they did their expansion with their garage, but there's nothing down here. So they understood there was a need to try and capture some of that. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of room for them to work. They could get rid of spaces, but then they're underparked. So it's, unfortunately, in a situation like this, choices had to be made. So they said, well, we need this many spaces. We want to make it handicap accessible. We want to do all the things we should be doing to make this a functioning, working septic station.
In looking at the whole, the front, I'll call it the front part, the part closer to the handicapped.
Sure.
Because it does look like your impervious is going to go up, and just because we know that this area is virtually all, it's all macadam down there, right? Well, even the parts that you don't own.
Yes.
Would your client consider using pervious paving in this area to further relieve the stormwater?
It's something they would certainly entertain, though I don't know if the township recognizes that as.
It's not necessarily about your calculations. It would just be about, good management, best practices, for an area that's clearly just nothing but a lot of impervious, that since you're ripping up and putting something down anyway, this would be the time to consider putting in some pervious paving.
I think that's a good suggestion. It's something we would absolutely consider.
Madam Chairman, if I may, for Mr. Falcone, so if you were to follow the ordinance without the waiver, how many additional new parking spaces would you have to create if you were to put in the required islands and plantings?
I don't have the number, Steve. We can get it, for sure. And you want measurement at the full parking space size as well? So,
well, I agree with the chair. I don't have a problem with the reduced parking spot width, but I think the ordinance, this won't go to Shade Tree until it comes back as preliminary. I'm not speaking for Shade Tree, but I think I know where they'd be coming from on this. Would like to see the ordinance followed, and if that increases your impervious on that back end, on the new end, then a few more islands with plantings, perhaps the stormwater management system expands. But as Mrs. Stern said, this is a big island, and now it's probably the only chance we're going to get to have that beautified a little and all the good things that trees do for us from stormwater and aesthetics. So I would like to know that, because it might be the addition of 5 or 6 spaces that allows you to comply with the ordinance.
So I think it would be a more significant change, but we will get an exact, what I'd maybe have us do is prepare a totally compliant plan, and then y'all can see what it would look like.
I think that would be great.
And then we can kind of
That'd be great.
work from there and find the best compromise.
I'm sorry.
Do you have any more ground to create more parking?
As far as I know, the property that we're proposing to develop is a full lease area at the moment, so no, we don't have any more ground.
You don't own it, Villanova owns it, and you lease it from them, or? Amtrak.
Actually, Amtrak owns the property along the railroad. SEPTA, through its 47-station lease agreement with Amtrak, leases the property that the current station is on. We, in order to construct what we have there now, we'll be required to expand that 47-station lease, demise properties with Amtrak, and also we're have to negotiate a little bit with Villanova for some additional property, basically in this area here, just to construct the stairs and the handicap ramps that we have shown. Amtrak is currently planning to expand the track centers through this area. They're in their early design stages, but they have told us that we have to accommodate track centers that are expanded, and so that's another reason why the ramps and the stairs are pushing a little further back than what the current track centers are now. So in order to do that, we've had to, lose more space, in essence, going away from the railroad to accommodate and, in essence, put in wider platforms that are accommodating the track centers now. But when Amtrak comes along and does the expansion of the track centers, then we'll cut the platforms back to accommodate the wider track centers without doing any detriment to the existing platforms.
So I guess the next question I have is, it kind of looks like we are going to be stuck between deciding if we want to cut back on parking or to cut back on our, green spaces, beautification, and trees. I mean, because you don't have any additional ground to create. You can't do both, right? I mean, you can't maintain 161 space. Your existing is 161, but whatever it is, you can't maintain the amount of spaces and put in the islands and do everything else because you have no more additional ground to draw upon. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Okay. Question. What's the width of the right of way that Amtrak actually owns? Does, for example, if you go further towards Philadelphia from where the end of this, is that property belong to Amtrak and it's controlled by SEPTA or controlled by Villanova, or is it actually owned by Villanova? I remember long ago that Amtrak or railroad right of way actually is a specific distance, and that although it may be leased to somebody else, the railroad still controls it.
The right-of-way width varies along the whole Harrisburg corridor. I believe through here. Do you have that on plans?
Yeah.
For example, you have two sets of parking lots right in what you showed. One of them is right next to the tracks, and one of them is further away. Does Amtrak own the real estate that's underneath that's further away set of parking lot?
Amtrak owns
the
property lines here, there, along here, down, and to here, and then it goes, a great deal long distance along here. Property line is basically along this general line here.
I guess my real question is where you have the cross-hatching where you're going to put the stormwater control system, and you see at a certain distance you drew a line with your finger. Does that go all the way down to North Ithan Avenue, which is the next street?
Yes, I believe it does go all the way down to Ithan Avenue.
So that you could extend the parking lot another 100
If
feet.
Amtrak
you could work
will
out
allow
a,
us to do that, yes.
but it's not something we have to negotiate with Villanova. It's something that has to be negotiated between SEPTA and Amtrak.
Has to be negotiated with SEPTA and Amtrak. And then Villanova also has their power plant is right here.
Yeah,
I don't
I know.
have the exact dimensions, or our plans don't go down quite that far.
Oh, I understand. Okay. The reason that I ask it, they keep bringing up, I happen to be the liaison of the Shade Tree Commission, and my number one question was going to be, well, if we're going to do this, having looked out the window and noting that everything that was up there that was taller than 15 feet tall was a light standard, trees would really be very nice to have added in there, even if it meant extending the parking lot along the right-of-way towards Ithan Avenue. I mean, if you could, add 10 or 15 spaces at the far end on the right, on this drawing, and take a couple out in the center where you could plant trees in there, that would be very, very helpful kind of thing to do.
So if you could come back with both the code plan and perhaps a variation on this plan that puts in more trees and more islands, because it is such a vast expanse of pavement out there.
Sure.
We would love to see that. And this is a sketch plan, so we're not going to be taking a vote, but we're going to ask for public comment and...
And I had one question for you all. One of the things we kicked around, because we do certainly want to try and make it as green and keep it as green as possible, and some of the things we thought to expand that are, and I was going to look for feedback tonight, we've proposed in here a 22-foot wide, basically turnaround. So you would come in, you would essentially drop a passenger, and then you could turn and leave, as opposed to continuing through, turning at the rear, and coming out. That is not at all required. We could close that. We think it's good planning. We think it's a good thing, but it's not necessary. That could become green. It could be a larger green island in this area.
I would ask you to talk to the township engineer about that.
Okay. And then secondly, we've added sidewalks through these islands where there are none today. So that is increasing impervious where there is not impervious now. We think, again, sidewalks are a good thing. These folks would park, they come in here, they have a sidewalk to walk down and not just grass, but maybe, Susan, this would be a good spot to do some type of pervious paver or something that would be somewhat pervious to allow for a walkway to access some of the crosswalks. But these are, again, we've designed this to try and make it as user-friendly as possible, but would certainly welcome the feedback from the Planning Commission as to what you all deem as important.
Just two real quick final things. One, it was pointed out to me that the dimensional requirements for the parking spaces is also a zoning requirement, 280-4. So in addition to the waiver, you would need zoning relief for
but
that.
The existing spaces are currently 9 by 18.
No, I know, but for the proposed, where you were saying that you wanted to expand.
Down here.
Right. And the other, this is just a design comment. Having been near and dear the last few years to handicapped accessibility, I would ask you to consider putting the handicap spots, at least a couple of them, closer to where the actual ramp spills out to the station. You have those, I can't quite tell because this is a black and white drawing, but it looks like the handicap spots are kind of across the first line of driving from the new station platform. Is that accurate?
Yes, for a sketch plan concept, that is where they were located. They can be moved. And will be moved. Yes.
Just from personal, it would be nice to put some closer to where they actually come down off of the ramp.
Understanding this is a sketch plan, I think things like that, obviously you're going to tweak them, but I think there's a balance that we have to put forth here. The pedestrian safety obviously is more important to me than islands and green space. That I think because it is located where it is and it is a park all day situation, it's a little different than having a parking lot in a shopping center or in a different area. So I think having more trees, but not necessarily the way we typically lay them out, makes sense if it's more pedestrian friendly, and as well as just makes sense. If you're coming to take the train, you don't want to have to walk extra distance to pass some trees. You can kind of incorporate them without moving everything further away. And obviously the handicap spots need to be where they need to be. But I'm not a big fan of the pervious pavement for the roadway because of maintenance issues in this location, especially if you're going to be designing for stormwater management for the entire site anyhow. But obviously, if for walkways and things like that, it's really up to what you've used in the past in other sites for what's been working. And I was just curious, that area that you're proposing the spots now, where the stormwater management is, what's going on there now? Is anyone parking there currently?
So there is, it's not being used right now for SEPTA passengers, but there is some facility use of the space, trucks and so forth like that.
So it's not a commuter parking spot right now. So these truly would be new spots for commuters. Okay.
Yep. They are, again, so they would replace all these spaces which are going away.
See, I was just concerned if people were already parking there and then you were kind of just formalizing it, but it's currently it's not actually available for commuters.
It's basically being used by Villanova facilities people to store equipment, to store trucks, to lay down materials.
Right where their boiler plant is.
Pardon me?
It's where the central boiler plant is.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
So I think that's a positive improvement to the site. Then, obviously, if you're going to take advantage of it's already paved over, and if you're going to incorporate that into your design, I think that makes sense. So, I think the plan overall, I think it makes a lot of sense. And like we're all saying, try to put the green in there, but only if it makes sense to do so. I think the waiver for the size of the parking space, I have no problem with that. I don't think anyone really has a problem with that if it's working for you now. And is that pretty much everyone else's feeling?
The one question I do have is, if we're taking away parking that Villanova is using for laydown areas and stuff like that, what's the probability they're going to try to pave something else to compensate for that?
I think that would probably be
That's kind of out of their purview, Doug.
I have a quick question when you're talking about just ideas and layout and stuff like that.
Sure.
I like the idea of a drop-off area, but I worry when people pull in there that they're going to be blocking those that are trying to come into park. And I've dropped off at that train station pretty regularly, and I've also come down to pick up Villanova babysitters for stuff like that. So there's a constant loop of people even not coming through, that are just coming through for other business. Is there a way that you can have a pull-off area closer to the ticket area, train station area, besides coming into the loop, so that you could turn that piece that you said didn't have to necessarily be a pass-through? Could that become part of an island or additional handicap parking on both sides, and that would increase your numbers or give you a little bit more greenery and allow some pull-off, drop-off, pick-up parking closer to the actual train station or under the overpass there? Is there room underneath there for that?
One big feature to this plan is the proposed tunnel for the project. Now, the tunnel has been located in a specific spot for reasons unknown to me at the moment, but there are many reasons that it's there, and rather than here where the ticket house would be, or further down the site to the east. So it's been designated in that location, and one thing that we have is basically the going back to the ADA accessible spaces. They are currently as close to the tunnel entrance as we can get them, while still providing the pull-through that you were just referring to. So we can look at some various options here as to their turnarounds and the different island locations. But ultimately what we've done is kind of come up with the best plan that we can with the overall layout and the overall concept. And we've gone through some of the iterations that you were just kind of referring to, as kind of sketches prior to this sketch, and we've determined that basically this is, we think, is one of the better scenarios. So
Obviously, I think your layout's very nice. I was just suggesting if you're looking for some more parking, and the comment with handicap that if you hadn't already looked at pulling off and dropping off in another area besides there, that maybe the flow could be maintained and the parking spaces could be, or greenery could be added. Just a comment.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, can we go to public comment?
Well, one other question. Getting down to it's a new tunnel that's going underneath the tracks, is that right, in place of the old one? How is it going to require an elevator or something to get down there from grade level? How is someone in a wheelchair going to get down from grade level down to that?
There are elevators, or proposed elevators at the station, as well as ramps.
No.
I apologize.
No, the handicap accessibility will be up and down the ramp system here and over here. Okay.
One ramp will take you from the elevated platform level down to grade level, and the other ramp will take you down to the level of the tunnel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the same thing on the opposite side.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
The new tunnel will be. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the existing tunnel there now. It's kind of small and dank and dreary, and this new tunnel will be very similar to the tunnel up at Fort Washington Station or the tunnel at Malvern that was just put in. In fact, the tunnel at Malvern was a bored tunnel, which this will end up being. It's going to be approximately a 15-foot diameter bore, and then sized down to, I believe it's a 8 by 10? 8 foot tall by 10 foot wide, clear space to better accommodate, two-way pedestrian traffic, push bicycles, strollers, who knows what all.
Great, thank you.
Can you put in elevators instead of ramps? That'll reduce a lot of impervious surface.
In the center city area, SEPTA does put in elevators, okay? Because elevators do have a maintenance problem at times, okay? This way, further out from center city, when the response time is not as great to come and fix the elevators, SEPTA tends to put in a ramping system, which, yes, it takes up a little more space, but it's a whole lot less maintenance in terms of elevators or escalators.
If that's the case, then looking at the way the ramp is, which one of those ramp is at grade? I mean, you're going to have one that's going to be at track level, one that's going to be at grade, and one that's going to be at the tunnel level. So it would mean that it would appear that the one that's furthest away from the station house is going to be the one that's at grade. Is that, or am I misunderstanding?
Actually, there we go. The high-level platform here will be approximately 4 foot above top of rail, and it will go down here to grade. And basically, the at-grade entrance will be right here. The access down to the tunnel itself will be down here, make a U-turn, and come back and end up in the tunnel pit right here.
Okay.
And basically the same on the other side, just in reverse. The tunnel pit will be here. You come out here, make the U-turn and back up to come out at grade. And then there'll be, because of this ramp is a little bit longer than this ramp, because you're coming out at grade, you're coming out at a higher elevation where basically the existing driveway is at Villanova. So you have a little bit longer ramping system. So basically this is an at-grade ramp here to go from the parking lot here right over to the high-level platforms.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Is there any public comment?
Actually, I have a comment. Having dealt with a wheelchair for quite a while, you're really asking somebody who's handicapped, who may be pushing themselves if they don't have a motorized wheelchair, to travel a great distance if they're trying to get to the other side of the track. And I would strongly suggest elevators. And I know you have a maintenance problem, but you need to keep the trains running. You need to allow people to get to the trains. And I'm sure there's some way that it could be handled. It will also cut back on your impervious.
Thanks, Kathy.
We'll take that under consideration.
Okay, is there any public comment? Great. Any additional board comment?
On the elevator issue.
Go ahead.
Have you noticed an increase in usage of the elevator handicap accessibility wise? Are those locations more utilized by handicap?
Not necessarily, no. The handicap usage at SEPTA stations is limited in general. Center City gets the most, obviously. And, I mean, it just depends on where the handicap residents are and what their individual handicaps may be. Okay.
I guess I'm just thinking, if you're going into the city from this area, you can actually have a choice of which train station you choose to embark on your journey. And so if in this area there isn't any place where you can use an elevator, then that might become a little bit more user-friendly. I don't know. I'm just curious.
The other thing that we considered when we were initially thinking elevator versus ramps is the Villanova University community itself. You have got a large number of bicycles, and they would tend to go up and down the ramp system rather than clog up an elevator a lot more readily.
I just think it's an opportunity to be able to get your spaces right, all your impervious right, and your shade tree right, just by getting rid of the ramps. There might be an equal exchange there. Then you're out asking for as many waivers.
How many people take their bicycles on the train?
That information I don't have right here.
Well, you just made a statement that they would use the ramps for the bicycles. Why would they be using the ramp if they're not going on the train?
A lot of times the students will take their bikes from one side of the tracks to the other to get to their classes quicker, to get to some of their jobs over beyond campus on one side or the other. There's just what I've noticed in my visits out to the site.
Mm-hmm. I'm just balancing the ability of an able-bodied student on a bicycle for his convenience. You further inconvenience a handicapped person in the wheelchair. And if you don't have a lot of people in wheelchairs using the train, it's probably because it's difficult access.
There's also a bike lane across the top of the overpass. So when you want to cross from on Sproul Road, there's an actual pedestrian bicycle thing, and that's what we use when we want to cross from side to side. We just go over the overpass on our bicycles.
In fairness about the ramps, I mean, I work with the federal government. We do this stuff. Elevators do end up becoming a problem after they get old. I mean, the first 5 years or 10, it's not much of a problem, but after that, they end up being difficult. And the key thing about an elevator is if it's out of service, then you have no accessibility. For the ramp, it may be a pain in the butt for somebody, but at least, barring a broken ramp, you still got the ability to cross. Sorry.
Okay, we don't have to, because they're not taking any motions, we don't have to have a consensus. I think we brought up all the issues, the elevators, the landscaping, the parking size. Is there any other issues we haven't touched on?
Is the ramp covered? Yes. It is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is that enough for you to take the next step?
I think it's great. This has been very helpful, so we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, Crow Investment Properties to subdivide existing parcel into 2 single-family dwelling lots at 299 Hares Lane in Radnor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am not George Brosman. I think you were expecting
Are
George.
you sure?
I look like him sometimes, but he's actually tied up at a meeting at Lower Merion. My name is Amy Farrell. I'm also an attorney at Kaplan Stewart. But we were wondering if you wouldn't mind, because George is much more intimately familiar with this project than I am, if you could give us a little leeway and flip your agenda.
Absolutely.
If you would, we're going to hopefully George will get here in time. If not, we are prepared to move forward. But if you could,
As you
consider the
may have
ordinance
noticed, we can
better.
go on and on about things. So if you need us to do
Take
that,
your time. Feel free. Feel
Thank you,
free.
Amy.
Thank you.
moving right along. Review of municipal ordinance number 2013. Oh, that doesn't have a number yet. This is the one establishing regulations for municipal uses on lands owned, operated, and leased or maintained by Radnor Township. And we'd like to have someone from staff come up and take us through it with the history and where we are now.
Absolutely, thank you. This ordinance was last in front of you July, August of last year, which you provided staff with some comments, primarily that it was too loose and needed to be tightened up a little bit. So we had been taking some time working on other ordinances. We've come back to this ordinance, have tightened it up using some of the regulations and language from some of the ordinances that had similar concerns at the time, namely the athletic field lighting, and took some of the language that the Planning Commission felt was more comfortable with and incorporated into this to bring this back to the forefront and for your consideration.
Okay.
And
then what, are you looking for us to take action on this?
Yes, I would like a recommendation. Right now, I tentatively have it set for an introduction at next Monday night's Board of Commissioners meeting with a hearing scheduled if we can get through the introduction at the July Board of Commissioners meeting.
Okay.
Just as a point of housekeeping, there is a typo in the ordinance with the section reference of 115.4. It should be 115.5.
And Kevin, could you just take people through, why we're doing this?
Sure. Right now, there's a process at any time the township wants to do something, we're obligated to meet our own codes. And sometimes that creates a much longer process than would be necessary in order to get some simple things through that may not otherwise meet the code. So this would help streamline that process, enable through a public meeting and through a public participation and process the approval of these projects without having to go through an amended ordinance every time or go and seek relief at every project that would not meet the code.
And with this type of an ordinance where it looks like the township's taking a different route to getting projects done than a typical applicant, is that how it's done in other townships?
Yes, it does. It's not dissimilar. Some ordinances are written where they're very lax for municipality. Some ordinances have specific regulations dealing with this exact issue. Some municipalities just ignore their ordinances, which I think has happened in the past here, and just do what they want. That is very problematic from a long-term standpoint if it's challenged. That creates problems for the municipality.
So we want to make it work for the township, but we also want to codify it so people know what's happening. And at what stage then would the public have a chance to comment or have their opinions heard on something the township perhaps is proposing to do on one of their properties?
That's one of the changes that we actually added to this, where we added a notification similar to a land development, that if a project is coming on a particular parcel that the township owns, that residents within 500 feet would be notified of the action being taken at a Board of Commissioners meeting. So a notification would go out notifying them of what is proposed, and there would be a public meeting at which the commissioners would be taking public comment before voting on the approval of said project.
Okay. Questions, comments?
I have two quick questions. Kevin, you said this is 115.5?
Correct.
What's 115.3 and 115.4? Because I don't see them in my zoning book. I'm just wondering what those are. We have a 115.2.
115.3 is bed and breakfast.
Oh, so that was added since my last book. Okay.
Yes, it's in the codified version. It's in the version online, and some of them haven't even been codified.
And the 115?
115.4 is outdoor dining.
Ah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, yes, I do too. Thank you.
I have a couple questions/comments. On notification, I don't think 500 feet is sufficient because I think it should be at least 1,000 because it's a township property, and it might be a large property, and I think you should go out beyond the 500 feet. So I would suggest the minimum of 1,000 unless
Would you want to see that from the property involved or from where the site of the change.
The site of the change.
Yeah, because some of those properties are so big, that would make a big difference. For instance, if a structure was going to go up in a corner of a park, you want 1,000 feet, for instance, from that structure, not from the whole park.
I would think so. That would seem to make sense.
That makes sense?
Unless you have other comments. The other thing was on A, Section A, renewable energy facilities and stockpiling of materials. They can be pretty ugly. And I'm not sure that that is something that should be done without some more community involvement. And it depends what kind of materials and how they're stockpiling them also. But I keep picturing a field of solar panels, and they're not attractive, and we might want to have some input. In fact, I know I would want to have some input on something like that if it were going next to me. So they were my comments on it.
No, jump right in.
I actually realized I had one other question. In B, where it says one off-street parking for every 4 seats or one off-street parking for each 200 square feet of gross floor area, I thought that we calculated it at 80% of the parking spaces were 80% of the gross floor area?
Yes, it's the floor parking is based off the floor area. Definition of floor area is 80% of the gross.
Gross floor area is 80% of the. So that's where I was confused about, is that I thought we have gross floor area and then 80% of that is what the parking is calculated from.
All of our other uses say that the parking is based off of the floor area. This would be more specific in saying it's off of the gross floor area. So it would be 1 per 200 of the gross floor area.
So,
slightly different calculation.
So it's a different calculation?
Yes.
Okay, so those are my questions. You want comments now? Please. Okay, I'm not in favor of the ordinance. And it's ultimately, for me, we could pick apart, for as long as we discuss it tonight, which is as long as the conversation happens to go.
Well, until George gets here.
Is fine with me. Right, exactly. Then we could go a while. I looked back at our ordinance. We actually looked at this in September of 2012. I had notes from that time. And it would, philosophically, this is about streamlining a procedure for the township. But my concern is that there's so many things in this ordinance that are very far-reaching. I mean, being able to have storage of a garage shed on a piece of property that's next to me when I'm residential could be a pretty big change to me. I mean, we think about the Public Works building being in the center of town, but then we talk about the fact that it's really not in the best spot. Well, what if all of a sudden we decide to put it smack dab in a residential neighborhood? And, or there's any number of things. I looked at the memo that Kevin had sent out to us back in September of 2012, and he mentioned a variety of situations that could come up, and some of them are just not what I would agree with. And the process that exists currently right now is that if the township wants to do something in the township that's not allowed by code, then what happens is the Board of Commissioners has to change the code. And while I recognize that that's a cumbersome process, it's one that allows for an awful lot of public process should there be something not particularly.
Is that what they do? They change the code?
Yes, we would change the code, but the individual neighbors in that area would not necessarily get notified of the proposed change. That we do a general advertisement that the ordinance is changing, but not necessarily the notification that would be required by this, that you're going to do the 500 or, as Kathy mentioned, 1,000 feet from the project area. Those neighbors would get specific, that are going to be specifically impacted by the project, would get specific notification under the proposed ordinance.
Right. So, and then when I looked back, Kevin did mention that there were some changes since September, but really the only 2 changes are on the back. Their D and E were added in September, and one says the natural resource protection and buffer yards shall be required unless otherwise approved by the Board of Commissioners, and then the notice of the notice of the proposed project, which we've already talked about, is 500 feet the right number. And what's complicated about that for me personally is that 500 feet might be the right amount in one zoning district but not in a different zoning district. Right. And so that, how do you start to codify that? Or one particular use might be appropriate for 500 feet, but a totally different use might need to be far more than that. I mean, we're talking about signs, parking, use, dimension, any and everything that we could possibly regulate in the township. This is basically giving the township the opportunity, on township land, to change it. And I watched the Board of Commissioners meeting a month or two ago when this was up for them, that got it sent it back to us. And I know, for listening to my actual commissioner's comments, she's not sure that this is right or wrong for us, and has some significant concerns about it, and wanted our thoughts on it. So I just knew I didn't want to go into this conversation with the belief that just because it got introduced to us, that means the Board of Commissioners are necessarily in favor or necessarily not. We shouldn't necessarily take that as a stamp of approval that it has been sent to us, because I know that my commissioner really questioned it. I don't remember everybody's comments. And for me, it is overreaching, and that's all I need to say about it.
I feel the same way. I think that the fact that it is including leased property as well, so anybody can strike up a lease any time, and that, to me, that's just way too open-ended. Township owned, I might be a little closer to thinking it was a good idea, but with the lease, that's too much for me. And operated, yes, exactly. So I guess what I had in mind was small little projects like putting in a bathroom or something at a park, but this is just really opening a lot of doors.
I have to add my voice by saying that paragraph C really worries me, because it seems like it's like the township wants to be treated in a special manner, and I really don't see any reason why they should be. I think that the township is capable of making bad and expedient decisions just like anybody else, and I just think that this is a recipe for real big problems down the road. I think that the township should go through whatever process an ordinary landowner would go through. I mean, that's equal, it's fair, and I do agree with the word overreaching.
I would support the position of not approving it, too. There's a lot of things in here I don't like. The ones I pointed out were the ones I specifically did, greatly disliked.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel, since the commissioners like to put a lot of zoning rules and laws in place for the common folk, they need to abide by them, same as we would on there.
Can we go to public comment? Is there any public comment on this issue? Thank you. Any further board discussion? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we don't approve the ordinance.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Can I have a show of hands? All in favor? Opposed? People who are abstaining? Thank you very much. Is George here?
Wait, what was that vote? 610?
Yes.
601, actually.
I can't get him, so I'm not sure if he's still in the middle. We can proceed.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about what we just passed a motion to
Not approve.
not approve?
Not recommend approval.
We did not make a motion to recommend against approval.
Yeah, well,
Those
it's
are
the same
different
thing.
Are they?
In this case, I believe that they are. Would you like to ask Peter?
Yeah, same thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, next on the agenda is the 299 Hares Lane subdivision.
Good evening again. My name is Amy Farrell. Thank you for indulging us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
We're going to go ahead and move forward. I'm going to give you just a little bit of a background on this. We were here in May briefly to discuss this. However, there had not yet been any review letters issued, so I think it was a little premature in terms of general discussion. There was some background information that was provided at that point, but it was suggested that we wait and return once a township review letter had been issued. That has happened. We do have a review letter. I do have with me tonight David Gibbons, who's the engineer for the project, who can respond specifically to some of those issues. As I said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the history of this, other than to say that this is a portion of a piece of what was a much larger property that dates back to the late 1800s. There was a subdivision in the late 1950s that created the two pieces that we're talking about here, as well as what are now two additional parcels that take access from Biddulph Road. In 1960, there was another small conveyance along, sort of right where at the bottom of Lot 1 here, that made that one large parcel. In about 1975, 1976, there was a subdivision of that property. So at the time of that subdivision, the property that we're talking about now really was a much larger rectangle. Two parcels were subdivided off of the third, so there are now two single-family homes that take access from Biddulph Road. Those were created by subdivision in about 1975, 1976. So the parcel that we're dealing with now is the remainder of that, and that's really what's shown on the plan here as Lot 1 and Lot 2. Currently, it's an approximately 4.4 acre parcel. There is an existing single-family home on the property right now. Its only access is from what is now known as Old Hares Lane. So the proposal is for a two-lot subdivision. We would eliminate the existing residence in favor of the two single-family residential lots. And those lots are each about 2 acres. One is slightly above, and one is right at 2 acres. There in this area of the township, there is no public water or public sewer, so these would be an on-lot sewer system, an on-lot stormwater management, and on-lot water water systems. There are some provisions in the ordinances which, as a result of that, would increase some of the requirements with these lots. However, because the lots are 2 acres or more, they meet all of those more stringent requirements. And that really is the summary. It's a very sort of simple, straightforward two-lot subdivision at this point. I suspect you have some questions for us.
Yes, but first, Roger, do you want to thank you for your letter? We got that. Could you go through what the points that you think are the most important for the, I mean, obviously we've read the letter, but the public hasn't.
A lot of the comments that were made in my letter were housekeeping comments on the plans.
Yeah, skip those.
And I'm sure the applicant will address all of those. Some of the highlights, as you mentioned, the access comes from Old Hares Lane, which is a private lane that extends onto this property. One of the comments I had asked that lane be constructed sufficiently for emergency vehicles, and also the turnarounds at the houses be constructed so that you could get emergency apparatus in there, in and out easily.
That is
general comments.
I think it's under the general comments.
They were general comments 3 and 4.
Yep. Okay.
I have a question on your review. Item number 1, zoning ordinance review, and maybe I just need some clarification. In that paragraph, you state the minimum width at the building line shall be 150 feet, based on certain attributes of that particular lot. And that final sentence says the information on the zoning table provided for the proposed lot width for Lot 2 is labeled as 54.3. Is that
Yes.
Is that a mistake, or is it that it's simply not wide enough?
On the proposed land development plan, there is what is required, a zoning table that lists all of the requirements on that plan. and there was an item on that zoning table that was mislabeled.
I believe it was just a typo, but David can confirm that.
What is the width there?
It was a typo. It should be the lot width at the building line, which is approximately 260 to 270 feet for these two lots.
For each one?
Yes.
Okay.
I would be happy to address any other comments. However, I think it'd probably be best to have the applicant run through them, and then we can address them after that.
I had a
Well,
couple-
go ahead. Why don't
yeah,
you
no,
go
I
ahead
had a
with your
couple-
questions?
Yeah, I usually do have them. Let's see. So, well, I know you did the thing about the features, showing the features. I wondered if, with regard to 25527A6, which is about street, a lot of stuff that I looked at had to do with the streets, because it was unclear to me if this Old Hares Lane, is that what they're actually going to call that? Is that a new street coming off of a cul-de-sac? Is that really just going to be, continue to be called Hares Lane?
I believe Peter can address that.
Because whether it's a cul-de-sac or a private street, I mean, there were all sorts of conditions about private streets and cul-de-sacs. And the one that I think I remembered coming across, I'm trying to find it here, interior lots have a minimum 20-foot width requirement, and the plan shows that that the road's only 12 feet wide. And I think that's under 255-6 definitions for the lots. But I might have the number wrong on that. And there was some talk
Is it a private street or a private driveway?
Well, that's what I was trying. It's not on the plan. That's part of it.
It's not on their property. It's not a driveway. It's the original street, the remainder of the original street that accessed the property before the school was built.
Okay.
Before the school was built, Old Hares Lane ran from the property all the way out to King of Prussia Road. The township and the school district approached the neighbors who accessed, or the property owners who accessed their properties from this road, and asked if they can move it to the location of New Hares Lane, now Hares Lane. That allowed the school district to have a larger single piece of property in which to put the school on. And so that's how Hares Lane came into existence. They basically shifted it from the old Hares Lane up to the new Hares Lane, so they had a bigger space for the school district. Now, starting from the cul-de-sac, going back to this property, once the school was built, it was then used for a walkway, trailway between the park and the school property. And I can't explain why, I don't know why, but someone failed to recognize that in moving Hares Lane to provide this property with access. And this property was still being accessed via Old Hares Lane, but then people complained that the township cut them off, and then they sued the township saying we have no more access. The township then and school district then settled that suit and said, okay, we will provide you access over the little connection between the new Hares Lane and the existing Old Hares Lane, and they're now accessing it over Old Hares Lane. But Hares Lane is not a driveway. It's the original private street that provided access to this property from, whenever.
I got that, but under the definition of an interior lot, which Lot 2 is now an interior lot, under 255-6, it says a lot containing a narrow projecting segment, which is the sole means of access from a street, and such segment shall have a minimum width of 20 feet. And on this plan, it's showing that it's 12.
That's not what's happening here.
Dave, can you put up the other plan? Yeah. No, it's the same plan. I meant the other board. I'm sorry. See that diagonal piece coming across, and Dave, you can show them. That is the frontage of the lot along the private street, which is longer than 20 feet.
And then there's also for the lot 2, there's actually 54 feet, and that was the typo. There's 20 down here, which has.
So the segment, it's the segment that has to be a minimum of 20 feet, not the roadway leading back.
That's correct.
Right.
Is that the one that goes to Badolf Road open, or is that just a piece of property?
It's a very small arm of property that was left. It is not open, and my understanding is that that's pretty well treed and fairly steep.
Yeah, I don't think it can be open.
It's not something that, it was never designed as a street. It was never intended to be open. It was just a little arm of this property that remained as part of that subdivision back in 1975.
And then have you looked at your plan on how it would be possible to get access to the properties, but also maintain that really nice walking trail between the school and the dog park?
So along the existing trail, which is now essentially along Old Hares Lane.
Old Hares Lane Road, which is now being used as a trail. I don't know legally what it is, but it's being used as a trail. Is there a way to keep that access for people?
I'm going to have Tom speak to that more specifically.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Bentley. The establishment, this is kind of complicated, so
go ahead.
Just bear with me. There's a little bit of hair on this job. The Old Hares Lane pretty much accessed a number of large parcels in here. And I used to go down there when I was a young boy. And over the course of time, these got subdivided and they got access from Bidoff Road. So this big piece here, this big piece here, both got access off of Bidoff Road. Oh, yeah, great. Okay, here they are. Voila. So there were large estates in here. One of them burned down, one of them got torn down, and they became accessed here. So this, at one point, was only an access for actually Mrs. Rollins, who I bought this property from. She had an old house down here that she used when she was in town. She lives in Jamaica now. And this portion of Hares Lane pretty much came and stopped right here at this point. And if you look at the plans that we have, the right-of-way for Hares Lane stops right there. This property right here, where people have been walking, has always been owned by Mrs. Rollins. Okay? People have actually been walking illegally on Mrs. Rollins' property, and there is even a sign here on private property that says public access. And when I met with John Rice, he told me that that sign really should be taken down because it's not really a walking trail. I don't know how it became a walking trail or what everybody said about a walking trail. We haven't found any documents that lead us to believe that it was formally turned into a walking trail. But I do know that Old Hares Lane, the right-of-way, which started at King of Prussia Road, got moved here, and then continued down here, stops pretty much right at this point right here. So going forward, in the marketing of these homes, I really don't have any problem with any of the neighbors walking up and down this road because I think they actually have a de facto right to walk up and down that road because they actually were accessing that area from that road, and then their houses got subdivided. I'm sure if you look in their deeds, somewhere in there, there's reference to Old Hares Lane. What we do have a little problem with is if a lot of people are walking their dogs and taking them down here for like their constitution in the morning, and when there's a large dog park right here that they can walk on, and I've been out here a number of times over the years, and I don't see a lot of people walking down there. Every now and then I'll see somebody walking their dog there. I don't have a problem if the neighbors walk on the road because I think they have a right to, but I do have a little bit of a problem that if people are parking here and walking their dogs down, and I have 2 new homes here, and the dogs are going to the bathroom, not going to the bathroom, but they're doing their doo-doo, on the road. I just don't think that's right. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Well, there are plenty of walking trails where dogs are not permitted.
There's plenty of what?
You can certainly have a walking trail and have the dogs stay in the dog park and just say this area is not open to dogs because it's a very big dog park.
Well, actually, you have a fence here that blocks the property from access that is closed most of the time, and people kind of walk around it and through it. But I mean, we can talk about that. I don't really have a problem.
Well, I just think that whatever the legal status is, it's currently used as a walking trail, and it's very pretty back there, and it's a nice connection between the school and the park, and it's hard in a township that's as built up as ours to get those kind of connections in, and we already have it here. De facto, it's there. It may not be there legally, but people are using it. I was out there today, and I saw 3 other people walking. None of them had dogs, and they were out walking that trail. And it would seem to me that since you're starting basically from scratch with this roadway, it's all torn. It's not a road now. It's a torn-up, gravelly old road. It's destroyed, and you'd have to rebuild it anyway. That there should be a way to put in a road and a trail through there so that people don't have to walk on the road. You know, on the other part of Harris Lane, there's a very nice little sort of bike trail, meandery thing, and then some grass and trees, and then the road.
Yeah, actually, in the settlement with the township, this was already kind of all figured out. It shows the grading. There's a large amount of water that comes down Old Harris Lane, which you've seen pictures of flooding, I believe, this house, and there's also some water that goes to these houses. And one of the things that the settlement with your township had to do with was managing that water. And one of the things we're doing is providing swales on both sides of the, what I'll call the new driveway, which takes the water, runs it across, and has a level spreader here. This is your design, not mine, and discharges water onto the park that runs down kind of harmlessly down there. You know, it is not as open and simple as you think it is. There are swales on either side of the driveway, and now we're talking about maybe making the 12-foot roadway or 10-foot roadway that was in the settlement agreement wider. So, I mean, it's not as simple as you think it is. I mean, right now people are walking on grass basically, and a half, you know, the base of an old road.
Madam Chairman?
Go ahead.
What he's discussing there with the swales is already a part of an approved grading permit that was part of that settlement.
And could that be redesigned to include a trail?
Engineering-wise, yes. Legally, I don't know. I wasn't party to that settlement.
Peter?
This is the approved settlement.
What was your question?
Could the plan for the road, including the stormwater management, be redesigned to include a trail?
I would have to look at the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement did specifically state one of the things the township bargained for was for this grading work to prevent the drainage. But I would have to look specifically at the settlement agreement to see if there was specific plans or specific requirements when that drainage had to be completed, whether or not we can go back and redo it and redo the drainage. I actually suspect we can, but I don't want to give you a definite answer without first reading it over.
Because I would think that since that path is already established, and it makes excellent sense to connect those two sides of on either side of that property, it would seem almost silly not to keep it if it can be done. And it looked, you know, I was walking it, and if there's enough room, I know obviously there would need to be proper grading and you know, stormwater would have to be taken into account, but those are engineering issues, and they can all be solved.
Yeah, I mean, there's engineering and there are legal issues with that proposal.
Okay.
The engineering issues, I think, can easily be proposed. The financial issues are whether or not financially it makes sense to build both the new road and a walking path. Legally, even if we get their permission to build this walking path, we would then have to research and make sure who else has easement rights along Old Harris Lane, and we'd have to get those people to sign off on the walking path also. The Old Harris Lane has always been a private way. It's only been open to certain limited number of people. It's not a public way that's been open generally to the public. And so the township, I think, has attempted to get it open to the public over the years, but based on my review, and this is kind of a review of other people's review of what's out there, I suspect that all the people who are necessary to get easements from, we haven't gotten easements from to put that walkway through to be truly legal and proper.
Can I wanted to go back to a couple of questions because I still don't feel like I got a clear answer on the question that I'm really trying to get at. And I appreciate the background on Old Harris, but Old Harris, where it used to exist on King of Prussia, exists no longer. And so my question is, because I heard the applicant refer to this road that we have labeled as Old Harris Lane, I heard him refer to it as a driveway. And I'm still trying to get my hands around, is it a private street or is it a cul-de-sac street? Because then I have, or is it a driveway? Because then I have specific saldo questions about which one of those categories. And I kind of can't figure it out from the plan, and it wasn't addressed in the review. So
my
do we know what it
understanding
is?
is that, in looking at the plans, the applicant does not own the property underneath Old Harris Lane. It is a private easement over various properties that they have a right to access their property.
Okay, so then, then my question is, are there, under private streets, because I can't tell from this particular overview picture, are there 5 houses between the 2 that are on Old Hares and however many go down actual Hares Lane? Because we're not supposed to have more than 5 lots on a private street. Or under 255-27E2, is the private street, does it have the consistent right-of-way and the proper width for what would be a public street? And I don't think that it does, but I can't tell for sure, and because it has to meet those minimum requirements. And is it going to have a homeowners association?
Well, and do the homeowners who live in that area even want that turned into a public access if it's crossing through someone else's property? Do they really want all those people down there as a public area?
But kind of my general question is, I have lots of questions under 255-27 that kind of weren't, it depends on which way you go. So that was one question. Then I had a question about the easements under 255-35. I have to go to the page to remind myself. And then under 255-54, do we require a fire hydrant? And it looks like they did meet the minimum requirements for 255-57. But are they giving all the necessary easements for utilities? Are they doing, because they're doing the utilities onto Biddulph, is that where the utilities are going to be? Even though there's not a road there, is that going to be settled with the easement down to Biddulph? Roger, that's a question for you.
As the utilities go, one of my comments was to ask that the utilities for each individual home be shown on the plan and an easement provided. And the second part of your question I can answer about the fire hydrant is there's no public water there, so there would be no fire hydrant.
Okay. And then the biggest thing I had is that if I see this plan correctly, there's over 13 trees to be removed, and some of them look to be heritage trees when I looked on page 3. And I just don't want to be in a situation where we are surprised after the fact to see how many trees are coming out of a property. Because as I said, when I looked on page 3, it looked as though there's at least 13, so I just wonder what the status is with this plan going to shade tree. And some of them look to be heritage, particularly under our new shade tree ordinance.
My comment 2.4 asked that any trees over 6 inches be clearly indicated on the plan.
Mr. Stern, this did go to shade tree, and at that time, shade tree determined it was not of the detail they needed, along with the engineer's comment, for them to truly comment on it. So they're waiting for that to come back with more detailed plans. And when they do, the tree replacement schedule and the whole 9 yards, when they do, they'll be able to provide very specific comments.
We've also taken it upon ourselves to already move the houses back to accommodate the heritage trees.
So the plan has changed some?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right, those were all my questions. And I mean, I reviewed it last month that it hadn't changed, so those were really just mostly questions from last month. Thank you.
Question, clarification, the electrical easement that you asked about is already, it's my understanding that is actually already in place, and I believe, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There was, I saw documentation of that. The electrical easement is, I guess, the original line of service to the existing home, and that easement was granted back in the 70s when the subdivision took place.
And I'm sorry, the one last question about streets. Roger, if you could look at it, because I do think that there's a limit. Again, it came down to what kind of street is this? Private? Is it technically
Well, do we have an answer for that?
Offshoot of the cul-de-sac, whatever, because there's a limit to how long a cul-de-sac street, Hares Lane is, when a street's private, but it also has a cul-de-sac, which one is it? Cul-de-sac street or a private street? Which trumps which? Because under 255-27D1, you can't be more than 800 feet in length, and I'm just wondering if they're compliant with that piece as well. That was my one last question.
This would not apply because they're not creating a cul-de-sac. They don't own the property coming up from what was Old Hares, so they're not creating a cul-de-sac on this. They're creating a lot that is adjacent to a private street.
Okay.
Question. I'll call it New Hares Lane for lack of a better term. What is now Hares Lane, the new section of it, is that a public street or is that private street?
Private. Hares Lane is private. Hares Lane is private. The part that is currently exists right now, Harris Lane, is private.
So
The sign, it says private lane.
Would you like to comment on Roger's letter or the review letter to see, do you agree with his comments, the minor things that he's asking? Are there points where you disagree?
It's pretty much will comply with his comments, and anything.
There was nothing that popped out?
Engineering related, we'll work through with him. Sure.
Okay. Did you get an answer to your question? Susan's still confused, Peter.
It's not a it's really just,
we wanted a determination.
I wanted, just wanted to really careful, because to me, because I could read it a number of different ways, and I don't know that I've ever encountered a plan that had a private street where the underlining, the ownership of the land underlying the private street was set up quite this way. It sounds different to me from what we've had in the past. So I was just, the various aspects of streets, I wanted to know some clarity on it, make sure it was compliant. That's all.
But Sue, I would think since the township or the school district messed up in cutting off access from this, that you might have to grant them a little bit of space there and call it driveway.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know that it matters what you call it. They need access.
I think that if you look at any street, it's owned. Our right-of-ways go into the center of street in Radnor. So I own the street in front of me. You own the street in front of you, even though they're public streets. So this is no different on the private.
Well, it's different because that's a public easement. This is a private easement.
Thank you.
Right, but I'm saying like the ownership underneath this road and every road in Radnor changes ownership as you go down the street.
Usually by the people who access it. This seems to be that the ownership is homeowners who won't access it. Think about your street. You own the land, the street that's in front of your house. These people don't have, there's a very large stretch coming off of the end of the cul-de-sac that they don't own, and yet they have to use to get to their houses. Now, I recognize there's a whole legal can of worms here, but it ultimately comes down to certain private property rights against others. I just wanted to make sure that the road was compliant. And I can't even find a definition of driveway in Saldo or zoning if we ultimately say it's a driveway, to make sure that it's compliant in whichever ways Radnor Township deems it should be compliant. That's all I was asking for, is for the engineer to check it.
No, I agree, but what I'm thinking is my take on it is that it's a private road up until the point where they take off from it. That's what my understanding was, that it's a private road rather than a private driveway.
I agree with you. I think it's a private road because of the way the property lines intersect with the road, and they own it until it gets to the yard.
So I'm not really as familiar with the site and the trail and what is existing there now, but I think for me, if that's owned by this lot, I mean, they don't have any obligation to continue allowing people to walk through their own property, unless there's some kind of. How are you getting to that conclusion that
it's an existing condition, that trail?
But it's existing trespassing on private property
with signs that say things like public access. Yeah,
but that doesn't really take away their property.
But it also
rights.
Works as a trail, and as a township, we can ask for trail access across private properties.
Are we going to ask that they donate that portion of the land to the township?
No, we would ask for
an
easement for a trail where the trail exists now, but moved over enough to give them a private drive.
I guess for me, if it were my property, I wouldn't see the reason why I would want to give that easement.
That's a lot of, liability, and the fact that
I just
why
don't.
does the township why do people need to come through that area if they've got a dog park right there? Isn't the dog park why they have that area for them there? I mean, what is the...
You can walk from the park to the elementary school.
But why do you need to... Who lives in the park that needs to get to the elementary school? I mean, the homeowners need to get to the elementary school.
Why do you need a trail anywhere?
But, I mean, that's someone
else's
else's
It's not just
property.
to get someplace from here. It's
Well,
to
Peter
enjoy.
can comment on this a little more clearly, but if there's an easement across this property, doesn't the... what is the act, Peter? The Recreational Use of Land Act protects the property owners.
Yeah, that's not the problem.
We should hear from the property owners and see, do they really want the general public using this as a public right-of-way before we
Well, they've already stated that they don't.
Okay, so then maybe, and why are we fighting for it?
Question.
Why
Who
would you
owns
fight
the,
for any trail?
who owns the adjacent property? Is that the school district? The what?
Adjacent in which direction?
Radnor Corporate Center? It's Radnor Center Associates.
Over here? No. Down below.
Down below.
Right there. Basically in parallel to where the trail is. Is that Radnor Elementary School?
No, the elementary school's down much further. Are you, where George was just pointing right here?
Yeah, just on the side.
This is the corporate center here. The park is over here. So here's the park.
Okay.
This is the loop road for the corporate center.
All right.
Sort of parallels Old Hares Lane.
If we wanted, just to throw the idea out, if we wanted to maintain an access route as a trail or something along there, but we didn't want it to be on Mr. Bentley's property or whoever he sells it to, we could just put it right over the line if the corporate center was willing to do such a thing. Is that true? And maybe the corporate center would be more amenable to doing it than because they seem to have a little bit more acreage than these two-acre lots. Or am I just way off in left field here?
I don't think Julia is suggesting that we require them to do it. I think what Julia suggested, and I'm very aware of the various property rights as well, but it's an existing path. It would be nice if we could maintain it. If we can work it out where it doesn't break anybody's back, then let's try and do it. And if we can't, if there's a strong objection, then we'll let it fall by the wayside. But, I mean, I don't think we want to get involved with trying to negotiate between the township and Radnor Corporate Center. We've got the trail already. It's there. If we can do it engineering-wise, that's one obstacle removed. So let's see if legally we can do it, and if Mr. Bentley doesn't object. I mean, obviously, we could limit it, no dogs and stuff like that, so it's just,
Right, you can't bring dogs to the school anyway.
Yeah, you can't, exactly. So there's a lot of trails you can't bring dogs on.
Because both Old Hares Lane and the new section of Hares Lane are private roads, the public generally doesn't have a right to go in there anyway. Is that correct? The only people who actually have a right are the people who need to get access to those lots and their guests or whatever. Is that true, or am I misreading the situation?
That's generally true, yes.
Okay, let's go to public comment, and then we can pick up board discussion again. Step forward.
Good evening. Thank you. I did.
Would you like to use a microphone so you don't have to bend over?
Does it go out?
Oh, here, this. Up here.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Try that.
Great. Thank you. My name is Steve Marshall, and I'm representing some of the neighbors that are impacted by the subdivision, specifically 245 and 243 Biddulph Road, and then Wyndham here, and two of the folks over who actually directly access or have whose properties abut the Old Hares Lane. We were here last month. We were sorry we weren't able to get to some resolution last month after waiting a long time, but we understand you have a long agenda, but we're back here. And in the interim, I'm pleased to report that we actually have met with Mr. Bentley and his representatives, and with respect to the neighbors' specific concerns, I think we are nearly at an agreement. So that is good news. Can just quickly walk you through the issues. This area, this flag, what we'll call this flagpole portion of the property, which will be part of Lot 2, currently has chain link fences on either side of it, sort of delineating what that property is. Mr. Bentley has agreed to remove those chain link fences, and we are discussing whether or not there's a way for these adjoining neighbors to maintain that area, because I think we're all in agreement that it's not going to be the first priority of lot number 2 to be making this a beautiful area, given that it's really only for the utilities and is useless as pretty much anything else. Right here at 245, there is an existing fence, a chain link fence, and I believe what's going to happen here is removal of that chain link fence, and that there will be a privacy fence installed per an agreement between the property owner and Bentley Homes. I don't know if anybody from Bentley wants to opine on the stormwater, but we have been made comfortable by some of the specific changes to the plan that they're proposing to address stormwater concerns, which you all saw last time we were here, specifically with respect to this property here and 245. But we are pleased that they are taking the steps to take care of those issues, and we are comforted by the fact that we think that the new conditions will be a lot better than what's happening now. Which leads us really to the what I think is the last open issue, and hopefully one we can close, but it's going to take a partnership here amongst I think the township, the applicant, and the neighbors. We've heard a lot about Old Hares Lane and access. I think the neighbors up here are pretty much resigned to the fact, and agree with the fact as a matter of private property rights, that these lots need to have access, and it will come through Old Hares Lane at some point. However, that's going to be a major impact on them, and in order to try to mitigate that, a proposal is on the table to have the access during the construction, which, as we know, could be a good deal of time, perhaps as long as 18 months or 2 years, come from Hereford Park instead of an initial build out of a driveway here, and then for 2 years. Pull the microphone back. Is that better? Okay, sorry. And then for 2 years, trucks coming up through Hares Lane all the way down that across these properties. There obviously would need to be some improvements here on this area that we've been discussing, but I will tell you that the neighbors have committed the funds to create a construction access to allow Mr. Bentley to use this, so there would not be a financial hardship on him in terms of creating something that would lead into the property for construction purposes. I say the township has to partner in this because obviously we'd be talking about construction vehicles coming through the parking lot here, but it seems to me, given all of the history and heartache of this, that wouldn't be really too much to ask for this period of time. I believe, Mr. Phillips, you had thought about that and thought that is a reasonable proposal. Am I speaking out of turn?
I didn't say it was a reasonable proposal. We discussed it.
Okay, fair enough. I thought I'd see it on the review letter, but I didn't. So in any event, that's where we are with that issue. I've addressed the other ones. I think, fortunately, that there has been a lot of dialogue, and we really appreciate Mr. Bentley and Bentley Homes coming to the table and being willing to work with us on that. But very, very, and you're probably going to hear from some of my clients as to how much this actually will mean to them as far as this application. So, with that.
Thank you, Steve.
Good evening. So I'm Dave Palmer. I live at 220 Hares Lane. So this is me here. So we talked a little bit last time. Maybe if you can zoom in on this, perhaps. But anyway, the point is that Hares Lane is a one-lane road. As new Hares Lane is a one-lane road, and seeing as how this is. Probably the right place to talk about this is the Planning Commission. When new Hares Lane was put in, the plan was incorrect. I mean, I think we all recognize that the township, did some things that they shouldn't have in terms of slicing off access to here. But when they planned this, they didn't plan for it to be, for it to have more houses than these two. And so they narrowed it way down. It is 2 cars wide at the mouth at King of Prussia Road, because at that point you have 3 houses. And so you can have a car waiting to turn while another one pulls in. But then as soon as you get past Steve Fisher's house, which is about, over here, then there's only 2 houses past, and at that point they narrow it down and it looks like this. So what happens is, that, and of course, these are 2 sedan-sized vehicles, but you can imagine what, an F-250 Super Duty or a dump truck full of silt would look like. This is the, that right there is the trail that was described that goes around the school. And so, my wife's car here is already a couple of feet off of the road just to get past my car, but, you can see that a dump truck would need to occupy most of that land there. So, anyway, the point is just to say that, this wasn't envisioned, and so, we're trying to figure out a compromise, and I think we may be able to reach one with the Bentley folks about how to get, a couple of years' worth of construction vehicles into this property. And, Steve referenced that the neighbors are willing to, we're willing to fund the construction of, a temporary access or whatever, a gravel access somehow to, shunt past the parking lot and get construction vehicles in here, because the road up to the Kreutzberg Center is a more proper 2-lane wide kind of access road, and you can actually, do that on a regular basis with all the vehicles that would be necessary. So anyway, I'll get to the last point, which is just that parts of Hares Lane, as you can see here in the picture, the new Hares Lane is about 12 years old. Just with a couple of houses worth of traffic, in places, because it wasn't really, it was put in all right, but it's starting to fall apart, particularly around the part that leads past my house and towards John Dustin's house here. And I think that one of the issues that's been put forward by the township is, to say to Mr. Bentley, well, if you bring traffic in here, you're going to need to repave or, resurface parts of the, Hartford Park access road. And my contention is that there's no way you're going to be able to do the same thing down New Hares Lane without basically ending up in the same place. You're going to have to, you're going to have to resurface this as well. So it's not a freebie to put them down one way rather than the other. And ultimately, we have the question that Susan raised earlier of exactly what is this road, who's on the hook to maintain it, and, if I end up on the hook to resurface the road in front of my house because of, the construction of somebody else's home, I think you can imagine that that will not sit well with everybody. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
John Dustin, 288 Hares Lane. So, I guess I would voice all of my neighbors' concerns, plus I would add a few in that this is my residence right here. And, I came up last time and talked about some of these issues, and I know you can't really address legal matters, but, there's some things that probably need to be pointed out for the record. So this is my house, and this house was existing before the construction of Radnor Elementary, when Radnor Elementary was getting discussed and planned. The topic of what to do with the old Hares Lane came up, and there was this agreement between certain neighbors and the township and the school district that as the solicitor described, the Hares Lane would be repositioned, and I would get access to my house via the new Hares Lane. But part of that easement agreement was that this back section of Hares Lane would no longer be a road and would become a public walking trail. Now, we've had these issues with the township that they wanted to open this up as a road as part of their settlement with my neighbor, which creates problems for us because it's contrary to our easement agreement. So, we've gotten arguments from the township's insurance attorney that this is not a road, or in fact that our easement is invalid. So if our easement's invalid, then we lose access to our house, or legal access anyway, and either sort of our house is effectively condemned, or Radnor Elementary School is trespassing. So that's an issue that needs to be resolved, and we've been trying to resolve this for going on 7 years, and we're still trying to resolve it today. So other issues are that that easement agreement again took away my neighbor's access to her property. I appreciate that needs to be addressed, but I do have concerns that this space here is simply not wide enough to accommodate both a walking trail and vehicular access. So that's an issue for us. We've again tried to take this up with the township many times, and gotten no response. I think that's because they've had their problems with the neighbor down there, but these are matters that need to be addressed. That's where we are. We have real problems with this. This creates real issues for us, and we'd appreciate the township and the school district's assistance in resolving all this. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other public comment? Okay. So I have a question for staff, which is, what could we accomplish tonight? I know this is listed as a preliminary final. Are we treating it as a preliminary? Are we treating it as a final? Do we need... Susan's pointing out that the plan has changed. So where are we? Anybody?
I would suggest we table it until we get the what's written on the last page. We recommend that the plans be revised to address the above comments for consideration for approval by the Planning Commission.
Yes, but typically when the applicant says that they're going to agree with everything in the letter, we don't do that.
Okay.
I believe by mentioning that the plan changed and clear this up, it changed only that it was addressing my comments, or
really from our meeting with the Shade Tree Commission, they asked us to move the driveway and the house a little bit so we could save a couple of trees. So that's the change. Okay. It was at your request.
And that'll be re-reviewed on the resubmission addressing the other comments.
Okay.
So with the resubmission, we wouldn't vote on this plan tonight because there's a resubmission. Is that my understanding?
No, I think he's saying that it would be...
Not necessarily, since the resubmission doesn't change basically the content of the plan. It just addresses the review comments.
What about the width of the driveway?
That doesn't come to us.
Excuse me?
What about the width of the driveway coming off of New Hares Lane?
What about it?
What is it going to be? Is what was shown in here is 12, and Tom, can you tell us that?
I don't know about that, but there was that settlement agreement. There was a grading permit issued to redo that driveway. I believe it was at 10 feet. So with this application, we're trying to balance. We've heard the concerns of the neighbors, and just generally, we know, we don't want to unnecessarily pave more than we need to pave. So our plan now is showing 12 feet. So it's a minor change to the grading permit that was approved as part of the settlement agreement. So we're proposing 12.
12 now, okay.
Which we believe is adequate.
That's adequate for emergency vehicles?
Yeah, and we'll, aren't there
Do you
a
have
couple
some pull-offs or something?
Yeah, the plan shows some pull-offs.
Yeah, the plan shows 2 pull-offs. My comment was referring to the actual pavement thickness and the structure so that trucks are able to come in and out.
Why does a driveway have a name? I'm sorry, maybe I'm the only one not following this tonight, but again, Mr. Brosman just referred to Old Hares Lane as a driveway. why does a driveway have a name, Old Hares Lane? That
you can
suggests
have
to
an
me that it's a
address.
street or a private street or whatever. And I recognize that there's a legal issue here and an agreement and an easement, but in terms of what is this stretch of road, driveway, private street, what?
It's a private street. It's what it was.
Okay,
it's
because
what it-
Mr.
it's what
Brosman just
is.
called it a driveway.
It's
Well, I-
functioning as a driveway.
Yeah.
Legally, it's a street. It provides our frontage. It's been in existence since at least the late 1800s. I've reviewed the title. I have reviewed the old atlas maps. It was Hares Lane, and then they built the school in the middle of it, and they moved part of it. But it's been there. It is a private road from a legal point of view. Practically, it's going to function as a driveway.
Doesn't it have to be 28 feet wide then as a cartway because
It's an,
private?
it's an existing
It's an
private.
existing-
They're not.
So that's the stipulation.
We're not
then.
building a new road.
They're not creating the street. It's an
Right.
existing private
You will
street.
be upgrading it, however.
We're going to upgrade it.
Make it pretty.
Yeah.
Mr. Brosman, have you submitted a waiver request letter?
For what?
Do you have any waivers that you're requesting?
I'm not aware of any that we need.
Okay.
So then the stipulation here is that it's a private road with a pre-existing condition, and that's why they're not having to maintain. That's why they're not having to meet the SALDO requirement for 25527.
It's a private street as defined in zoning, and that's correct. It's an existing private street. They are not creating it.
But in SALDO, a private street normally would have to have a cartway of 28 feet.
If they were creating it, I agree. This is an existing
That's my
private
point.
street.
That's not really. Maybe I missed that stipulation.
In 615 Newtown
That was
Road.
not made. This is the first time I'm hearing the stipulation that this is the reason that they don't need the waiver, which is why I kept asking this question, is it's a pre-existing condition. And I heard several times the applicant refer to it as a driveway. So driveway road, no, it's a street with a pre-existing condition. That's your position.
Yeah, it's legally, it's a street, and we can keep it the way it is, but functioning as a driveway.
Okay, is there
how much renovation or alteration to the paving do you have to do before it becomes effectively? You'd have to bring it into compliance with the new full width. Is there? Let me rephrase the question. Would there be any circumstances under which they're repairing it when they'd have to bring it into compliance with the 28 feet width?
I don't believe so.
No.
All right.
So I guess we could recommend that if they make the changes as spelled out.
If they comply with the
Right.
township engineer's
But that
letter.
still leaves the issue of the construction access. Do we want that resolved?
I'm not sure that we can comment on that. That's a
can't.
deal between the township and the owner. Peter, you're going to have to weigh in again on this. Do we?
Yeah, I mean, the township's going to have to agree to provide access to the construction vehicles over our park property. And, I would be surprised if the township allowed that without getting some sort of guarantee or money up front for the possible damage that are caused by these heavy construction vehicles over the park property.
But that's something that'll be handled.
But that's something that would be handled administratively and then eventually by the Board of Commissioners.
Okay.
They're the ones that would have to sign off on any such agreement.
I don't think that's really a part
But
of
we
our
don't need
job
to
because
address
in terms
that.
of planning, it's not a long-term thing. It's a temporary problem they have to work out.
So we can go ahead and recommend that with the changes that we would recommend approval.
Yes, we can.
And since the only plan that we have before us is the one that's here tonight, and since the only thing that I've heard to the contrary is just that the applicant says that they've moved some trees, which no disrespect to the applicant, but I don't have a different plan showing it me. Is everybody okay with 13 trees being removed and some of them look like they're heritage trees? We don't have a recommendation or anything from the Shade Tree Commission about this particular plan, and I'm just telling you, I counted for at least 13 trees, and they look like some of them are heritage.
That can also be addressed at the grading permit stage because they will be, when they submit their grading permits for the individual lots, that will also run through Shade Tree at that time.
But by being addressed, that just means they put in the number of trees required once they're removed. It doesn't.
It means they comply with the ordinance, however, that they
Right,
choose to comply.
and at this point, because they have no waiver requests and they have agreed to make all the recommended changes, I don't see how we can leverage any something different with the trees.
The applicant still needs to go back to Shade Tree, because when they were at Shade Tree, the plan that did not address the comments was not detailed enough for them. So this will have to go back to Shade Tree, aside from the grading permit requirement.
But we wouldn't need to see it again until land development.
This is preliminary final.
That's right. We're done.
Actually, the technical definition, it doesn't actually qualify for preliminary final. Just, I mean, because it's more than 3 acres. So we're not, first of all, I don't even think our MPC obliges us to pass anything as a preliminary final. But this thing for sure, because it's over 3 acres, doesn't even necessarily qualify as a minor subdivision. If it's more than 3 acres.
So would we then recommend approval as a preliminary plan?
We could do that. If there's really something you want to see again coming back.
Well, I guess it's just, because.
But we know that it's going to go to Shade Tree.
Trees will has to get approved. I mean, like what he's saying is, as soon as you send in the grading permit, and you tell how many trees are going down, you show which ones you have to remove, you show a reason that it has to be removed, and where you're going to plant because you're removing one. And then, so Shade Tree will go all through that, and they won't let it, if they have to move the driveway, the Shade Tree will tell them, move the driveway so that this heritage tree has to stay. So that has to happen in this grading application. They can't skip that step.
But I wouldn't be against it being a preliminary approval, because that does seem like that's a legitimate way to handle this situation. If it doesn't meet the requirements for preliminary/final, and we still haven't received the approval from Shade Tree. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I don't feel very good about it. First of all, we did go to Shade Tree. We have moved the houses a slight bit to allow for the preservation of the heritage trees. And, we will be doing a tree replacement plan with them. We're working on it right now. And as far as the 3-acre thing, Susan, on minor subdivision, we're kind of shaking our heads. We don't know where that came from.
I'll reread my definition while you guys talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked at that, Susan. It looks to me like it could be read. It does talk about 5 lots. We only have 2. It talks about building development of less than 3 acres. And typically, single-family homes aren't considered of themselves 3 acres. And I doubt we have building coverage here of 3 acres. So we're under the 5-lot minimum. So personally, I think it'd be a shame for a plan like this to go through preliminary and final. It's just a lot of review and a lot of plans for this. He does have to go through Shade Tree, and as Roger said, the whole each grading permit. So we would ask that you consider preliminary final.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of doing both. As well.
Peter, can you tell us, does it meet the requirements for the
minor subdivision? Yeah, I would have to say I do agree with Mr. Brosman on this. I read it more as not the actual lot size, but more of a size of disturbance or size of construction, and not lot size of the original tract.
Thank you. Is there any other board comment? I'm sorry, Doug.
My question was going to be, Susan identified 13 trees, some of which were at least 13 heritage trees or whatever, and the Shade Tree Commission, of which I'm a liaison, did recommend that you move the stuff. How many trees does that quote save? How many trees are going to have to be removed versus what would have been removed before? Do you know? In other words, how much have you lessened the shade tree impact?
I believe there were 6 heritage trees out of the 13 or so that were to be removed by the current plan. However, we're going to be relocating or shifting the driveway over slightly to not disturb any heritage trees.
None at all?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other board comment?
I could go either way. I'm a little concerned that the neighbors' concerns be met and addressed in the plan. And I would like to see that happen. It sounds like you're coming to an agreement. I would like, there seems to be a lot of loose ends here. I'd like to see the loose ends taken care of. If this is the last time we're going to see the plan, before I would approve it.
Kind of the other side of that argument. I think there's nothing going to change between now and when we see it again. The situation is a bad situation for the existing property owner and for the neighbors. I don't know what the solution is. There was a lot of litigation that resolved it. There might be more litigation necessary. I don't know the details of it all, but I don't think any of that really has anything to do with our decision here. As it relates to construction access, we can't bring in a third party into our approval process that's not here tonight. So that's something between the three parties or two parties in the township that they need to work out. I just think we need to address the plan before us, and if it meets our requirements, then I think we should, we should vote on it.
Could I address that point quickly?
Go ahead.
I respectfully disagree with that position. I think the Planning Commission has a lot of latitude with respect, because you're an advisory body, because you're making recommendations. I don't see there anything improper with recommending or suggesting that the township, given the totality of circumstances and history here, could strongly consider working to let this access come this way as a way to minimize the impact of this project on the neighbors. Again, whether the board decides to do that or not, obviously it's going to be up to them. But I don't think there's anything improper or illegal with including that as a condition of your preliminary/final approval.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
For the record, what was your name? You're Steve Marshall.
Yes.
No. Thank you.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Question, are we, before we make the motion, are we going to do anything about addressing the issues related to Harris Lane rather than supposed to just the lots?
We are not going to solve the legal problems. I understand that the township has determined what they've taken their position on it. Some of the neighbors still disagree, and they may take further legal action. I don't know, but I don't think that that's our role.
All right.
Just one question before I make a motion. Or I guess I could just make the motion, so forget it. I guess I'd make a motion that we approve the plan, preliminary and final. I would like to add one stipulation, if I can do this. I'd like to see if we could redesign the plan and work out an easement, just a trail, no dogs, just a trail between the existing park and the elementary school. I don't know how to phrase that.
You condition your recommendation of approval that's met. You say this is a condition of approval, or we recommend to the board that you attach this as a condition of your approval of this plan.
Start again.
Does he need to start again?
Yeah, sure.
Or if you wanted to be softer about it, what some townships say is that you recommend that the applicant and the township explore that. I don't know what Tom was going to say, but we would like to not have it be a requirement that we give up this private property.
Well, of course you wouldn't, but we're in the middle of a motion here.
Yeah, but he may not legally be able to.
Well, can we add on to the motion that as approved by the residents? I mean, they're the ones who live there. Why don't we say that it could be explored by the township if approved by the residents?
That's robbery if you let.
I personally think it should remain private. I feel that that's not right to take
Peter
someone's land.
Wasn't there a Supreme Court case not too long ago out in Oregon where the Planning Commission approved as a condition of an approval that an easement had to be granted over private land for a bike path and a trail?
That was the case, but I believe.
I mean, I like the general concept of having hiking trails and walking trails and so on, but I'm uncomfortable with making it a condition. I really am. You're the expert, not me. I know enough to make trouble, but I think that it is an issue that we have to be concerned about. So I would not recommend that we condition an approval. Either we wait for the plan and table it, or we vote without a condition. Although we might want to express an aspiration that it hopes
But that's how we do that. We don't make the decision. The Board of Commissioners makes the decision. We're recommending to the Board of Commissioners. And what we're saying is, we think the plan should be approved, but we would want to see this trail. And then the Board of Commissioners either works out the details or doesn't.
Okay, well, it wasn't phrased that way. That's why I'm concerned. It was phrased as a condition. And I'm saying I think it's a mistake to go that route. We can recommend that they do it. I agree with your phraseology. It's up to them legally with proper legal counsel to determine whether it can be done that way or not.
Sure.
Could I make one comment?
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you for taking the time to do this tonight. I know it's a little confusing. I am a big proponent of trails. I've built lots of trails in my 40 years as being a builder. The only thing I think that is a little bit tricky here is you have a dog park. Okay, everybody goes there. I've been there 100 times. Everybody takes their dog from all the townships around. Everybody meets at the dog park, and to have a sign there that says no dogs allowed on the trail, I just think it's ludicrous. I just think, I mean, there's 95% of the people here are here for dogs. Maybe 99% of the people are there for dogs. And if there's a trail there and they've been walking their dogs on it, I think they're just going to continue to walk their dogs on it. I don't have a problem with a trail, but a trail that goes to a dog park, I have a problem with. And I just think it's not fair to my future homeowners, and I will fight it. I don't believe it's right. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Steve, could you make another motion? Restate your motion, please. You can do it.
I'll make a new motion, if that's acceptable.
Well,
we
have a motion on the table. It probably needs to be withdrawn at this point.
I'll withdraw the motion to hear Regina's.
I'd like to move that we recommend approval with the shade tree approval, as well as the revisions to incorporate the comments that they were all agreed to upon, as well as recommend that the exploration of a potential walking trail be incorporated. It could. I am not saying it has to be on their property. There's other places there, and
that's fine.
So I'd like to just keep it open, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would appreciate if it remained. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't want to make that a requirement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Before you vote, please, just me being a stickler, you're looking for the approval or recommendation of approval to be conditioned upon compliance with Roger's letter and compliance with whatever comes out of the Shade Tree Commission. Thank you.
What about the neighbors' comments?
Well, they've been heard, and they'll go to the Board of Commissioners, too.
No, I mean that you were working something out with the neighbors, but that's not really solidified yet.
I heard everything was worked out except for the construction access.
I sent a letter, my attorney sent a letter to their attorney, and I think, did we have some kind of a...
Everything's agreed upon then?
Agreed upon? I mean, I think we're close enough, aren't we, Steve?
I think we are, except, again, I would really love to have some kind of a inclusion of
It's not going to happen tonight.
Well, I got to ask.
Okay.
You know, the
Okay,
real
so-
issue here, just so everyone knows, is coming through...
Mr. Marshall, microphone, please.
Sorry. Correct. The real remaining issue here is the uncertainty that the neighbors feel about how construction access is going to take place. And like I said, they're willing to put up money to see it happen through Hereford Park. I think that tells you how important it is.
Is that possible for us to add that we would like to see them explore it? Or
I don't think
really.
that we
You're going to
need
make your case in
to
front
add
of
that,
the Board
because
of
that's something the commissioners
right?
have to decide, and they have to decide if that's the way they want to go, and that's
Yeah.
going to happen at that level. It's not about planning.
Right.
You know,
I
we're
feel like
looking at big term,
we may
long
agree
term.
with that idea, but we're really
Right. I mean,
not
we
in
would
a
love for
position-
everything to work out nicely for the neighbors,
Okay.
but that's not our concern right now, that particular issue. Okay, there's a motion on the table. There was a second, I believe. All in favor?
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. Regina, could you restate your motion, please?
So recommending approval with shade tree approval as well as, how did you want to phrase that, Peter? The comments
engineer's
addressed.
letter.
Recommend approval conditioned upon compliance with the review letter, Roger Phillips' review letter, and compliance with the comments coming out of the Shade Tree Commission.
Okay. I'm
And-
fine at leaving it right there. If somebody wants to add the next part, they can add it.
I would like to add then that we would also like for the commissioners to consider pursuing a trail easement through the area. Through the area. Where,
Where it is now?
I'm trying to
or
give them
any-
flexibility, so if they could put it somewhere else, perhaps.
Okay, that's
Okay.
what I wanted to hear.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? One opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any old business?
It's been withdrawn.
Need to announce it. I did not. All right.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Thank you all. We're adjourned.
Adjourned.